Hi guys, welcome back to the Female Fitness Podcast. I am your host, Danny, and in today's episode of the podcast, I'm going to talk about, first of all, when you might want to move away from tracking your calories or macros, some signs that that might be appropriate for you or your clients if you're a coach yourself, and then following that, how you can achieve your goals without tracking calories or macros, or how you can support your clients in achieving their goals without them having to track. Because I know it can be quite confusing, as tracking can be, a really helpful tool in a lot of circumstances and can simplify in some circumstances achieving your goal because it gives you a greater idea of your energy intake. And so, it's important to support your energy requirements if you have performance goals or if you want to build muscle tissue. And we know that if you have a goal of fat loss, it's important to be in an energy deficit. And so it makes sense to track in order to support you with those goals. But sometimes it's not appropriate, or it has more of a negative impact than a positive on someone's overall quality of life, their relationship with food, or even their ability to achieve said goals. And so it's really important to consider all the methods of achieving our goals or supporting your clients with achieving theirs. And it's important to be aware of some of the things that might happen for some people as a result of tracking that may mean that it's not an appropriate tool for them at this moment in time. And it's important to stress that because even if tracking is not serving you right now, it doesn't mean it won't ever serve you again, and vice versa. It might have served you or your clients in the past and resulted in great progress when you were striving towards a certain goal, but it may not be appropriate for you any longer now. And it's really important to recognize that so that we don't feel like there's a right and a wrong, and so that we're able to use the methods that are appropriate for us at each moment in time rather than getting really attached to certain methods that have maybe served us in the past, or getting stuck in our ways and thinking, okay, this is my method and it may never change, because change is a part of life and different things will be appropriate for us at certain phases of our lives, and that's perfectly normal. So, I'm going to start by explaining some of the things that you might witness that mean it's appropriate for you to move away from tracking, or it's more appropriate for your clients to move away from tracking. So, one of these warning signs is that you, if you're the person who is trying to achieve your goals, or your client, is avoiding social occasions. Now, avoiding social occasions is problematic because it means that we're missing out, therefore, on the health benefits that they provide, the opportunity for in-person human connection, which a lot of us don't get enough of these days. And it means that our quality of life is probably going to be impaired, alongside the quality of our relationships, which is obviously something that's going to impact our health and quality of life. So we don't want to be avoiding social occasions. And if tracking is meaning that we or our clients are doing so, either the tool needs to change if that's resulting in that behavior, or the approach to tracking needs to change. So, if, for example, you are striving to achieve your goals and you do want to use tracking as a tool, I would always recommend pushing yourself to attend social occasions, even if that means you have to be less accurate with your tracking during those occasions, because of how beneficial they can be for our health. And because if you want to achieve long-term success with a goal, you're going to have to learn to manage social occasions at some point. You can't avoid them forever. Like, they're going to be a part of our lives. And if you don't learn how to manage them, whether you're tracking or not, rather than avoiding them, you're going to get to a point where you you have an occasion that you don't have a choice over whether to attend, like a really important one, such as a wedding, for example. And then that might cause you extreme stress and anxiety when it shouldn't, or it may result in potentially disordered eating behaviors, such as excessive overeating, binging, that type of thing, if you have avoided them for a long time. and you don't know how to approach them and you feel really uneasy during them. So we don't want that to happen. So it's important we don't get into this habit of avoiding social occasions for all of those reasons. It's important that we push ourselves to attend them, regardless of whether we're using tracking as a tool or not. And if you find that physically impossible whilst using tracking as a tool, it's probably a sign that tracking is not appropriate for you right here and right now. And again, that doesn't mean that it's never appropriate for you again. It just means it's not appropriate for you right now. And it'd be good for you to focus on other targets, which I'll come on to later in the podcast, as opposed to the numbers, because some people, when they track, find it really hard to take a middle ground approach. They find it very hard to use tracking as like a guideline, and instead they see it as these are rigid targets and I cannot not hit these targets, and that is problematic. And yeah, it's so important to make sure that we're not avoiding social occasions. So if that is coming up for you or your clients, either address the approach to tracking and make sure that they're or you are not seeing it as something that is you have to be super rigid with all the time, because that's not why it's there. It's there as a tool, it's there as a guideline, it's not there as a rigid restraint, or it shouldn't be there as a rigid restraint in most circumstances, unless you were doing, like, I don't know, a competition prep or something like that, and therefore it might, you take everything to the extreme in relation to the goal. But if you're someone who is not doing a competition prep, it's not going to serve a purpose for you. It's not going to come with more benefits to be super rigid with using tools like tracking. It's going to come with more benefits to be flexible around using those tools, and to make sure that you're still living your life and you're not avoiding these occasions where you haven't got complete control over your food. So that's the first point. Secondly, another sign that tracking is maybe not serving you right now is if you feel extreme stress, guilt, or anxiety, if you are outside of the targets that you wanted to hit. So, say you had a target calorie range of 1,800 to 1,900 calories per day as a random figure. If you experience extreme stress, guilt, shame, if you're outside of those targets or you feel like you've failed, then that is a sign that you need to potentially either you need to work on your relationship with tracking, or you need to move away from it from the time being. And sometimes moving away from it temporarily can be a great opportunity to work on your relationship with it and work on other targets outside of these numbers, so that then when you return to it, you can have a much healthier relationship with it. And again, that ties into that point of, just because a tool is not appropriate for you now doesn't mean it can never be appropriate for you. Maybe you just need to work on your relationship with these targets first, away from them, before you can come back to them and use them in a really productive way. So that's something to bear in mind. And I got a message from a client not long ago saying in her check-in that she was able to enjoy dinner and cake with her friends with no guilt attached, and she was able to do so spontaneously rather than pre-planning that event. That is an example of a really great relationship with food, and she didn't overeat during that occasion. She was able to actually just eat a really moderate amount of the dinner and cake. She was able to stop when she was satisfied, as opposed to eating until the point of being uncomfortably full. And that is because she has a great relationship with food, a great relationship with um tools that she's using, and therefore doesn't have this all or nothing approach where she's either, tracking or she's not, and she's the other end of the spectrum. And so that is an example of how it can really benefit not only your health and quality of life to have a great relationship with food and a great relationship with tracking and to be more flexible with it, but it can also impact your ability to achieve long-term success with your goals. Because if you do have this kind of all or nothing mindset, if you see your targets, such as, calories and macros, as rigid restraints, you're going to be more likely to engage in behaviors such as overeating in occasions where you are, presented with foods you might usually avoid, or in occasions where you haven't got control over all of the food that you're consuming, where you feel like you're unable to use the tools like tracking. And so it's important to recognize that having a great relationship with food is going to contribute to your long-term success because you're going to have a lesser likelihood of engaging in behaviors like overeating, which could impair your health and also impair your quality of life and your ability to achieve any goals that you have. And another sign on the same kind of wavelength is if you can't go a single day without tracking your food, or you can't have like a meal that you haven't tracked, that is a sign that I would say it would be beneficial for you to move away from tracking for the time being, build a better relationship with food, a better relationship with that tool, and then you might find that you see great progress without it, and your relationship with food and your health is better without it. Or you might be able to return to using it as a tool when you've developed a better relationship with it. And I, to think about why this kind of would be so beneficial for you and your quality of life is if you are in that position where you cannot go a single day without tracking your food, if you're always having to have control over everything you eat, you've probably at the moment got a lot of your brain space that's being taken up by things like macros, calories, thinking about your next meal. Imagine a life where your brain space wasn't taken up by those things. Imagine how much brain space you would then have for other aspects of life. Imagine how much more enjoyable and stress-free your life would become. And I've had clients, one of mine checked in the other day, who said since working together, she's no longer constantly thinking about food or living on MyFitnessPal. And despite still caring about her body composition, she's changed her perspective on doing things to before just trying to keep her body as lean as physically possible to now a health focused approach. And as a result, her coaching abilities have improved, her knowledge has improved, and she's now able to help other women improve their relationship with food, body image, and hormone health as well. So it just goes to show that when that brain space is freed up, it can enhance your life in so many ways, both personally and professionally, because you just have so much more capacity for things outside of just thinking about food, your body, or your next meal. And that is amazing. And it feels liberating. It feels like freedom. Obviously, I've been through that kind of process myself where I've had that brain space freed up when I moved away from bodybuilding, when I moved away from the extremes. And it's just amazing. It just feels like you've got all of this capacity released that you didn't previously have. And it just enhances your life in so many ways. So if you're currently in that boat where food is taking up a lot of your thoughts or your body is taking up a lot of your thoughts, I would urge you to think about, like, in a year's time, if I continue with this, what opportunities will that take away from me? How will that negatively impact my life? Versus if I actually work on my relationship with food and my body image right now, and I build a better relationship with tools like tracking, if I am able to achieve my goals without this constant mental noise, how would that change my life? Like, what opportunities would that open up? How would it impact how I felt? How would it impact my ability to show up for my loved ones or for your clients if you're a coach? Think about these things because it will give your goals meaning and it will increase your likelihood of actually being able to take the action because it is sometimes uncomfortable, the action you need to take to achieve your goals, whether that be to improve your relationship with food or body image or physical health or anything else, or even your body composition and your performance over the long time. Like, all of these goals involve an element of discomfort. And it's so important, therefore, to think about how achieving these goals is actually going to change your life on a practical level to increase your probability of being able to lean into the necessary discomfort and do the things that you know you need to do to achieve your goals. So that is something that I would always think about, like, give your goals meaning and think about how achieving them will impact your life and the life of those around you as well. Another sign, and I guess these kind of link, they tie in together, is that you're very all or nothing. So if you're either tracking and you are, in your eyes, quote unquote, perfect, or you're not tracking and shit hits the fan, that is again a sign that tracking is not serving you, because it's meaning whenever you don't have access to that tool, you end up engaging in behaviors which are harmful for you, and that's not going to contribute to your long-term success. And so if that is happening, you've got a question like, wouldn't you be better off not tracking, learning how to sit in this middle ground, learning how to not be all or nothing, and therefore have a much greater probability of achieving long-term success with your goals, because you know how to navigate the messy periods, you know how to navigate the times where life isn't perfect. And let's face it, life is very rarely perfect. Like, we're very rarely going to have perfect conditions to, do everything how we want to do it, like do everything in a way that's optimal on paper. That just isn't life. So we need to be realistic in recognizing that our conditions are never going to be perfect. There's always going to be obstacles, there's always going to be things present that make achieving our goals really, really difficult. And so it's important to be able to learn how to navigate those periods of time. If we want to achieve long-term success, it's important to be able to handle the occasions where, I don't know, you have to go to A&E and you've only got access to certain foods. You haven't got the ability to eat what you wanted to eat in that time. It's important to be able to navigate those times in a way that still allow you to show up for yourself with respect and move the needle forwards towards your goals over the long term, rather than thinking, oh gosh, like I can't obviously behave in an optimal way, so I'm just gonna throw the kitchen towel. Throw in the kitchen towel? Is that the phrase? I don't know. I'm just gonna take an all or nothing approach and not think about saving myself. It's important to be able to instead manage those occasions rather than ending up, I don't know, excessively overeating or not eating anything at all. Otherwise, you're always going to have these periods of your life where things aren't perfect, that interfere with your ability to achieve your goals and end up making you go backwards and potentially ending up back where you started. Like, that's not productive for anybody. So you need to learn how to sit in the middle ground if you want to achieve long-term success, because life is never plain sailing. And I have clients that have once felt very attached to tracking, that have said they're no longer reliant upon tracking to eat well and support their goals. And I think that that's a really common misconception, is that if you move away from these kind of rigid approaches, if you move away from things like tracking, you're going to kind of let go, quote unquote, let go. You're going to end up going backwards. You're going to end up gaining a lot of body fat, for example. You're going to end up not showing up for yourself, when actually the opposite is true. When you have meaning to your goals, when you're acting in line with your values, when you have a great relationship with food and your body, you're able to actually show up for yourself regardless of whether you have the ability to track your food. You actually want to show up for yourself because your goals have meaning, they have purpose, and you are no longer reliant upon tools like tracking to show up for yourself. And that's how you achieve long-term success and improve your quality of life. So it's worth reminding yourself of that, and hopefully that puts things into perspective, because I know that there probably are those of you listening to the podcast who do have that fear of, but if I let go of tracking, I'm going to gain loads of body fat. Or if I let go of, tightly controlling my steps, I am going to become lazy. But that's far from the truth. When you actually take the right approach and you learn how to sit in the middle ground, it actually becomes the opposite. And it's so, so liberating at the same time. Another example of how tracking might not be serving you right now is if you avoid certain foods, such as whole food fat sources, just because they're higher in calories, and you think that that isn't worth the calories, because these foods can be so beneficial for our health, first and foremost, like especially whole food fat sources, as opposed to diet or like low calorie alternatives. They're so good for our health. And so that's point one. And if you're avoiding them, you're taking that hit to your health. But then, even following on from that, a lot of the time, even if you have, say, body composition goals, whole food fat variations of certain foods are often far more satisfying. They keep us fuller for longer and they're way more enjoyable. And actually, enjoyment is important from a nutrition perspective if we want to avoid behaviors like excessive overeating. And enjoyment is important if we want to achieve long-term success with our goals, because if there's no enjoyment there, if you hate the foods that you're eating, or you're trying to convince yourself that you enjoy them, um, there will probably come a point where you're sick of this. You're like, I'm sick of this. I'm just going to revert the other way. Or whether there's not much enjoyment in your life, like even just the ability to be able to enjoy your food can provide you with a lot of stress reduction, a lot of comfort, a lot of joy that might not previously be have been present or might not be present for you right now if you're never allowing yourself to try different foods or consume these foods that you might really enjoy. So I think it's so important to kind of challenge yourself on that. And an important point that ties into this as well is that if you have come from a background of quite rigid dieting, excessive restriction, chasing being extremely lean and avoiding these foods because they are higher in calories, there are people, it's very common that people kind of convince themselves that they don't like certain foods, say like nuts and seeds or butter. And when you've told yourself that you don't like something for a very long time, it's very easy to convince yourself that that is the legitimate truth. Or sometimes it's easy to convince yourself that, say, you have like an intolerance to a certain food, when the reality is subconsciously you're avoiding that food because of the fear of the calories or the fear of gaining body fat. So that's something to bear in mind as well. And I've had clients in those circumstances. Um, for example, they have told themselves there's too many calories in like breaded chicken or salad dressing, or they've told themselves if I buy that thing, I'll eat the whole pack in one go. But clients have said things like, I've got a quote here from one of my clients, by allowing myself everything that I want, I don't feel the need to binge eat, and I can actually just enjoy it as a part of a healthy, happy lifestyle. And that is incredible, first of all, like insane progress. I am so proud of each and every person that I work with. But beyond that, it is also something that's going to contribute to their long-term success, because then they no longer have this all or nothing approach. They no longer avoid certain foods or fear them. They're getting the health benefits of those foods. They're getting the psychological satisfaction. They're feeling more satisfied for longer, which is probably going to result in a lesser likelihood of overeating. And they're enhancing their life in so many ways. And even when it comes to things like fertility and our bone health, it's really healthy, it's really positive to consume lots of whole food fat sources, and it's important for like our skin health as well. And that's something that I know a lot of you who listen to the podcast care about. So it's so important to kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture and to challenge your mindset if you're of the kind of if you're currently stuck in that headspace where you're always trying to consume the lowest calorie food possible. It's important to question, is that really serving you? And what are the potential downsides of that? And another sign is that you spend more time on MyFitnessPal than you do present in your everyday life. If you're constantly on there, like working out your calories, working out the calories of what you're consuming, playing around with the foods on there, imagine what you could do with that time or the headspace if that was freed up. How much better could you spend it? And another client example here is that one of my girls said she now takes care of herself more, not from a place of punishment, but from a place of self-respect. She and also her partner has noticed that she's been more energized and happier, and her training has also been so much more enjoyable. She celebrates what her body can do rather than constantly picking herself apart and trying to make herself smaller. And so that's an example of how, again, your life can be enhanced by challenging yourself to work on your relationship with food and body image. And last but not least, another sign that it would serve you to move away from tracking or to improve your relationship with it. But I think in this circumstance, with this point, it would be really helpful to move away from tracking for at least a period of time to get back in touch with these things. And this point is that you're completely out of touch with your hunger cues. So you just eat in response to certain times of the day. You just eat in response to the numerical targets in front of you. You don't acknowledge, am I actually hungry for this? You don't ever eat in response to hunger. You don't ever veer outside of your typical meal times. That is a sign that it would do you good to move away from tracking so that you can get back in tune with your hunger cues and you can learn to trust your body again, which I know might feel worlds away if you're struggling with your relationship with food right now, or even if you've just been tracking for a really long time. Even if you don't have like a particularly bad relationship with food, but you've just been tracking for years and years and years, it can result in you being very out of touch with your hunger cues. And it might serve you well just to spend a period of time, maybe not even forever, maybe just a few months away from tracking to get back in tune with your hunger cues and get back in touch with your body a little bit so that on the times where you haven't got access to tracking as a tool or you can't track super accurately or you go on holiday and you just wanted to spend time away from it, you can do without stress and worry. You're like, no, I can listen to my body. I can trust my body at this time. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important to spend some time away from tracking. So there's some signs that I think indicate it would be really good to spend some time away from tracking or to move away from it potentially altogether, but nothing. I think it's important to recognize that no decision is ever permanent because that takes a lot of pressure off of you making decisions and I think increases our likelihood of being able to do what's right for us in the moment. And so I'm now going to move on to how you might coach your clients without using tracking as a tool, or how you might achieve your goals yourself without using tracking as a tool, because it's not always, necessary. It's not always right for us. And often placing an emphasis on behavior change and education will get your clients the results that they desire, but also increase their likelihood of long-term success and have a positive impact on their lives. So one of the things I do with clients who don't use tracking as a tool is I'll set them habit-based targets. So these will be specific to them as an individual. When I take a client on, I will always assess where they're currently at, what their behaviors look like, what a typical day of eating looks like, anything they struggle with from a relationship with food perspective. And then I'll set them habit-based targets off the back of that. So, as a simple example, if I take a client on board and they are currently not eating anything before they train or before they run, they're crashing through the rest of the day. A simple habit-based target might be that I want them to have something such as a banana or a squares bar before they train. That might be a simple habit-based target that I set. Another example in the kind of realms of more, I guess, self-development might be that I want them to journal for 5 minutes when they have their morning coffee. And sometimes I will pair one new habit with an already existing one to increase the probability of the client being able to get it done because they're already doing the first thing. And if they pair the new habit with something that's already existing, it they're not having to kind of create more space in their day. It's like, no, they're just adding something to something that already exists, and it will increase someone's likelihood of actually getting something done. Another example of a habit-based target that I might set is to try a new food or a food that the client has not tried for a really long time. And these type of habit-based targets can be really beneficial because it not only gives the client guidance as to what they need to do to progress with their goals in a really realistic way for them, in a way that's a step forward to them, but it's not completely overhauling their life all at once. But it also encourages them to think about the benefits that certain behaviors or certain food sources have to offer them beyond them just being calories or energy. It gets them to think about the impact that the habit they're implementing has on how they feel, perform, and function. And that can increase someone's drive to stay consistent with a certain behavior. And again, that can increase someone's ability to succeed in the long term because they're like, no, this behavior benefits me in so many ways. I actually feel so much better as a result of having more colour in my diet or as a result of eating something before I train. It's had a direct impact on my performance. And so I'm going to keep up the good work with that. So that's an example of how it can be so beneficial to do that rather than just giving someone numbers and then being like, okay, like I'm just relying upon these numbers to succeed with my goals and some things still aren't feeling right. Um, and it helps if you focus on like behavior habit-based targets, it makes sure that someone doesn't become reliant upon things like tracking, even if you use the two in combination. So if you have clients or yourself, if you track, but you also focus on behavior change and implementing certain habits and doing things that make you feel good, the two in combination can be really powerful as well, even if you don't decide to kind of move away from tracking altogether. So that's another approach that I'll sometimes take with clients is we'll take a blended approach, and that works really well as well. Um, I help my clients stay consistent with these habits whilst they're new, whilst they're still novel and kind of being developed by asking them to fill in a daily habit form. And this helps hold them accountable and encourages them to reflect on how they feel, perform, and function in relation to whether they've ticked off certain habits. And again, that can solidify, I feel so much better when I do this thing. So it might be that they have to tick off whether they have journaled, for example. And they will also on the same day rate their energy levels, how they feel, their sleep, all of these things. And if the journaling has been ticked off and they also feel great and they'll also rate their digestion and things. And then on the days where they don't tick their daily habits off, they see all of these things take a nosedive. It will again strengthen their ability to and their desire to engage in certain behaviors, which is super powerful, especially over the long term. And sometimes I will get clients to send me a visual food diary of pictures of food that they have eaten for a few days over the course of the week so that I can give them feedback in line with their goals that isn't just reliant upon numbers and again is focused on that behavior change and also food quality as well, which is sometimes neglected when we look at calories and macros and we don't think outside of the box with that. With some clients, I will also give them an example meal structure alongside education on the benefits of different foods and behaviors around food. All of my clients receive guidance on how to structure their meals so that it supports their health, their well-being, and their goals. And an example meal structure can be very beneficial, especially for clients that are brand new to making health and fitness a bit more of a priority. If they've not paid any attention to their nutrition before, they might need some guidance on structure. And so I will provide that. But they also get support on the reasons why and things like navigating social occasions so that they can enjoy these aspects of life whilst also succeeding with their goals, as opposed to avoiding them for reasons that I spoke about earlier in today's podcast. I also encourage my clients to be more mindful around food and teach them how to be more intentional with their decisions around it, which is beneficial for everybody, regardless of your goals. I make sure that my clients identify their core values and think about what acting in line with them on a daily basis might look like on a practical level. I get them to think about making decisions in line with their values if, for example, health is one of them, I'll get them to think about making decisions in line with their health so that they can feel authentic and then making changes from a place of self-respect rather than from a place of punishment. And again, getting people to think about things like their core values when it comes to making changes, when it comes to setting goals, can be really beneficial. One, to make sure that any goals that are set are in line with the person's values, so they have an increased likelihood of achieving them. And second of all, just to give the goals more meaning and make sure that they are actually appropriate for the individual as opposed to just a kind of surface level goal that they've seen looks good on social media or that other people are chasing. For example, right now, lots of performance goals are really popular, like marathons and um, Ironmans and High Rocks, and all of that stuff is amazing. And I'm so here for it if the goal is appropriate for the person. But I do think it's easy to feel like FOMO and feel like you need to be jumping on the next trend when in reality it's not appropriate for everybody. And so it's important to take that pause and ask, no, what do I value in life? And like what goals would be in line with them as opposed to sacrificing the things that matter to you just to achieve a certain goal and then feeling unfulfilled and unhappy at the end of it, because that is the risk that you run if you do just set goals for the sake of it that aren't really meaningful to you as an individual. Another thing I do with my clients who both those who track their calories and those that don't, is I encourage frequent and open communication with me. So all of my clients have in-depth check-ins, inclusive of the opportunity for calls with me, where we can have proper back and forth conversations, and they know that they can contact me outside of that as well via WhatsApp. A lot of the coaching that I do takes place within the conversations that we have, within the calls, within the check-ins. And I make sure to ask for verbal feedback from everyone I work with on how they're getting on rather than purely relying on numbers. My clients know that they're never a burden and there is never going to be any judgment from me, and they can talk to me if they are ever struggling or if they ever have any questions. So that is so important because unless, as a coach, we know what's going on with our clients and what the person is struggling with, we're not going to be able to coach the person in front of us to the best of our ability. So, whether you're someone who has your own health and fitness goals, it's really important that you're open and honest with yourself so that you can support yourself. Or if you have a coach, it's important, and I'd recommend getting a coach if you can. It's important you openly communicate with them so that they can support you to the best of your ability. And if you're a coach, it's so important to encourage open communication from your clients so that you can support them to the best of your ability. So, communication is always key in any relationships that we have in our lives, and that is inclusive of coach client relationships 100%. So, that is a little bit on how I work with my clients who, both those who do track and don't track, but especially those who don't track their food, and how we can support our clients outside of just using numbers and some signs that tracking might not be serving you or your clients. And I really hope that today's podcast has been insightful for you. I really appreciate you guys investing your time in listening to the podcast. It genuinely means the world to me, and I'm so grateful to have each and every one of you here with me. If you do want to achieve your goals without having to track every gram of food on MyFitnessPal, or if you want to track still, but make sure that you're supporting yourself outside of tracking and that you have a healthy relationship with it, that you're not reliant upon it to show up for yourself. I do have a couple of coaching spaces available at the moment, so it would be a pleasure to hear from you. I will put the link to Enquire from Coaching in the description down below. So just head there and fill in my inquiry form, and I'll be in touch with all of the information that you need. I also offer mentorship. So if you're a coach who wants to better support your clients, again, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You're welcome to send me a direct message on Instagram and we can have a chat there about how I can support you. Or you're welcome to inquire via the form below. Whatever way suits you best, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I will look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.